Good evening. It is Sunday night, November the 8th. It is time for the NFL Week 9 recap edition of the Iman Report. If you like what you see, please be kind and hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Tonight, we thought what we thought would be a good game, I guess not, between the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In this game, New Orleans was sharp. The first half they came in and scored 31 points on the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay is supposed to have a really good defense, and tonight they blew the doors open over what is normally a good Buccaneers defense. Tonight was also probably one of the worst performances I've ever seen out of Tom Brady in his 19-year career in the NFL. In the first half, Tom Brady had a 24.1 passer rating. In the second half, see where I'm looking to see where Brady finished as in terms of passer rating. Yeah, this was not a good night. 40.4 passer rating. You just don't see that too often out of Tom Brady. The run game was AWOL tonight. Ronald Jones only got 9 yards. Leonard Fournette, 0. Whereas the Saints, Taysom Hill had 54 rushing yards. Alvin Kamara, 9 rushing yards. Michael Thomas, 5 receptions, 51 receiving yards. But Brady just put on a show, and this is just one of those times where you just got to tip your hat to Sean Payton. Sean Payton is not going to prove a point tonight and send a message. The Saints are not going away anytime soon. They want to leave a champion and try to get Drew Brees one more championship before potentially retiring. As for Tampa, a lot of questions going into the final 7 games. Tampa Bay is probably not going to win the division now that they've been swept by the Saints. They're likely going to end up a 5 seed. They're likely going to play Philadelphia in the first round in the playoff bubble somewhere. Probably Texas or California. They'll figure out this bubble situation as we get closer to January. But the biggest concern is there a divide between Tom Brady and Bruce Arians? Tom Brady got his way and got Antonio Brown to Tampa Bay. How disgruntled will Bruce Arians be? Will Bruce Arians want to come back in 2021? Or does Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski say, hey, we want Josh McDaniels to coach the Buccaneers in 2021? I think that is a real possibility. I think there is a chance you could see Josh McDaniels coaching the Buccaneers in 2021. I could see Bruce Arians not returning next year. But I don't think he's going to get fired. I think he'll probably leave because he does not want to have to deal with Tom Brady in 2021. I think this team is divided, distracted, but the Saints have their number. We're going to find out how far this Buccaneers team will go deep in the playoffs. They only have one more game to play against top competition, the Kansas City Chiefs, within 3 weeks. They play the LA Rams in 2, but I kind of think the LA Rams are starting to fade. But we are going to find out a lot about these playoff teams, and this week kind of gave me a clue where maybe the 7 seed is going to be in the NFC. But I think at this point, the Buccaneers will be a 5 seed. They will get to play Philadelphia in the first round. So they'll at least get to the divisional playoffs. But after that, we're going to find out a lot about Tom Brady. And if they start getting, but if they start, say, losing to teams like Atlanta and Carolina down the stretch, then I do think then we have to really start questioning if this team is distracted. But as for the Saints, they are a contender. The question is, are they a 1 seed or a 2 seed coming into the stretch? But I think today painted a picture of maybe how bad the NFC is this year too. We're going to start off with the Thursday. We're going to go to the Thursday night game. The 49ers getting blown out by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was just one of those games where it should have not been played Thursday night. It should have been pushed back to Sunday or Monday. With Kendrick Bourne getting a false positive, can't take a lot out of this game from the Niners, but this was probably one of the worst performances I've seen out of Jason Verrett this year, and Jason Verrett and God, I'm having a brain fart. I am so sorry. I know it's Mosley. I'm trying to think of his first name. Let's go with Mosley, but yeah, Mosley did not. Emmanuel Mosley, there we go. Now, Emmanuel Mosley did not have one of his better games. And at this point, and then you had guys like River Craycraft playing and Trent Taylor. It was just not exactly a recipe for success. Richie James was the only one that showed anything in that game. But it's looking like maybe we're going to have to see Austin Walter play running back next week. Green Bay sent a message after that Super Bowl. After that conference game loss, Devontae Adams went off. Valdez Scantling had a couple touchdowns. But at this point, you can lock in Green Bay as a. At this point, I'm locking Green Bay in as a to win the NFC North at this point, with everybody else kind of fighting for the wild card at this point. On to Seattle. Seattle loses to Buffalo 44-34. Yes, Seattle's defense has problems. And Josh Allen was almost perfect today against the Seattle defense. Stephon Diggs, Josh Brown all had good games. And today's game also proved Russell Wilson is not Superman. Wilson threw 2 picks, sacked 5 times. And the run game was shut down for Seattle as they were held to 34 points. But that doesn't leave Buffalo's defense off the hook either. Buffalo's defense is still atrocious. Seattle's defense was just a bit worse in this game. It also was an indication of how bad the NFC is this year. Green Bay and Seattle, 2 teams who have atrocious defenses. Buffalo is likely going to be a 4 seed is likely going to be a 3 or 4 seed come playoff time. And they beat a team that's possibly going to be the overall number 1 seed come playoff time in Seattle. But this has to be But this is kind of a red alert game that maybe it's time for a new defensive coordinator next year in Seattle. Maybe bringing back Dan Quinn may not be the worst idea for Seattle next year. But as for Buffalo, this was a statement win. This was a signature win for Josh Allen going forward, and Buffalo has cemented themselves as a contender in the AFC. Now on to another big game this week. The Baltimore Ravens beat the Indianapolis Colts 24-10. Phillip Rivers did not look good today. Phillip Rivers is not good against Phillip Rivers is not good against good defenses. Lamar Jackson wasn't great, but he was good enough. The Baltimore defense took care of business against the Colts, shutting down the Colts' run game. So, yeah, Baltimore is going to be the 5 seed at this point come the playoff bubble time. Now the Colts' loss could put them on the bubble of making the playoffs at 5-3. The next 2 out of 3 games for Indianapolis is against Tennessee. They need to at least get a split in order to keep their playoff hopes realistically alive. In Jacksonville today, in one of the toilet bowl games today, Jacksonville loses to Houston 27-25 in what was really a toilet bowl game. Houston, Deshaun Watson was good enough. And with Houston kind of doing nothing towards the playoffs, Houston is starting to look like a team that might have to tear it down to the bolts at some point. Or they're going to need, unless they can get Eric Bieniemy there to save Deshaun Watson, they're starting to get a lot of people demanding a trade out of Houston. Jacksonville, Jake Luton looked pretty good in his first NFL start. 26 for 38, 304 passing yards, 90.2 passer rating. James Robinson almost cracks 100 yards today rushing. But Jacksonville was just bad enough to lose the game and cement their spot as the number 2 pick at this point. So soon enough, this will be Justin Fields' team in Jacksonville. In Tennessee, 2 teams that are going the wrong direction. The Titans right the ship today and beat Chicago 24-17. Chicago was able to shut down Derrick Henry and pressure Ryan Tannehill a bit. But Tannehill did good enough to throw 2 touchdowns despite being sacked 3 times. A.J. Brown was the security blanket today, getting 4 receptions for 101 receiving yards. David Montgomery yet again gets 14 carries for 30 yards. Foles, 36 for 52, not exactly good. And Allen Robinson, 7 receptions. But Chicago now 5-4 and could be in jeopardy of falling out of the playoff race soon if they do not correct things. They next get a Minnesota team that is suddenly surging at the right time with wins over Green Bay and Detroit. So we're going to find out a lot about these 2 teams. Chicago kind of trending down. They've not been really that. And we're going to find out a lot about Matt Nagy in the next few weeks. Nagy starting to find himself on the hot seat in Chicago at 5-4. If Chicago does not make the playoffs, I think Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace should both lose their jobs. I've defended Matt Nagy, but his refusal to run the ball is getting very concerning. He's mismanaging David Montgomery, and I kind of think Chicago should consider going back to Ryan Tannehill at this point. Tannehill looks like the better quarterback than Foles. And I think it's starting to look like Matt Nagy might be over his head in Chicago. If he loses to Minnesota, it could be game over for Matt Nagy. Kansas City survives a squeaker against the Carolina Panthers 33-31. And Patrick Mahomes was good. Teddy Bridgewater was actually pretty good too, throwing 2 touchdowns, throwing for over 300 yards. Mahomes threw for 4 touchdowns. With McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel having touchdowns today, Tyreek Hill had 2 touchdowns. Carolina always tends to play up, has been playing up to the good teams this year and playing down to the bad teams this year. Now Carolina at 3-6. Kansas City still locked into their 2 seed at 8-1. In Washington, New York beats Washington 23-20. So that now could help Washington towards its cause of drafting a quarterback next year. And Daniel Jones, not a bad game, 23 for 34, 1 touchdown pass. And for Washington, they lose Kyle Allen to injury today. Allen likely out for the year with an ankle injury. It looks like going forward it will be Alex Smith starting. I kind of think they need to go back to Dwayne Haskins. If you're going to lose with Dwayne Haskins. Haskins can get you the better chance at drafting your next franchise quarterback. Smith was not exactly great. 1 touchdown, 3 picks. But yeah, New York kind of hurt their draft position today by winning. In Minnesota, the Vikings come up victorious against the Chicago Bears. And don't look out now. The Detroit Lions. Vikings victorious over the Detroit Lions, 34-20. And don't look now, Minnesota is all of a sudden maybe clawing back into the wild card race. As that 7 seed at this point, it might only take 8 wins to make the dance. Kirk Cousins, 13 for 20, 220 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 141.7 passer rating. Stafford, not exactly great today. 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown. Unfortunately, was knocked out with a concussion in this game. And then Dalvin Cook goes off for 206 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. And this loss, I think, seals the fate for Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn. They are pretty much goners after today's loss. This was a win Detroit needed if they want any hopes of sniffing the wild card at this point. Detroit's probably going to be a 6-10 team or worse at this point. And today just proved it that Matt Patricia is not the answer, will never be the answer. Neither is Bob Quinn. It is time to change the culture in Detroit. Whether or not they draft a quarterback is another question. With the cap going down, this is where it's going to be very difficult to trade Matthew Stafford. That's the problem, that there's just may not be QB needy teams willing to acquire quarterbacks this offseason with the salary cap projected to go down in 2021. But Detroit, it's just simply time to tear it down to the bolts. And it could mean Detroit might have to retain salary in order to trade Matthew Stafford. But Detroit is not going to be a bad coaching vacancy this offseason. But it won't be the best coaching vacancy out there. In Atlanta, the Falcons beat the Broncos 34-27. Matt Ryan, 25 for 35. Throwing for 3 touchdowns in this game. And Drew Lock was not too terribly bad. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And Atlanta actually did a good job stopping Gordon and Lindsey today. Jerry Jeudy had a touchdown. Atlanta almost blew it, but not today. Atlanta now 3-6. Denver 3-5. But this was one of Drew Lock's better games of the year. Hopefully we will see more progress out of Drew Lock as we get towards the end of the year for the final 7 games. In LA today, the Las Vegas Raiders beat the Chargers 31-26, but it was almost the Raiders that blew this game today, as the Chargers thought they had a touchdown to win the game by Donald Parham Jr., but it looked like he dropped it, unfortunately, and Herbert has, unfortunately, another game where he comes close, but not close good enough. And it was Devontae Booker and Josh Jacobs splitting reps running the football today. Derek Carr had a good game, 13 for 23. Nelson Aguilar with a touchdown. Darren Waller with a touchdown. And at 5-3, the path to the playoffs looked pretty good for the Raiders. But that defense is not good. Raiders might be good enough to make the dance, but to win a playoff game is another question. And they almost choked to a lower opponents due to their terrible defense. Paul Guenther needs to go after this year in Las Vegas. And as for the Chargers, Anthony Lynn, I don't know. It's if Gus Bradley's not gone, it's going to be Anthony Lynn that gets the axe. And with potentially Jim Harbaugh being out there, potentially bailing out of Michigan after this year, we're going to see if we start seeing teams start jettisoning their coaches in hopes of landing Jim Harbaugh this offseason. And the Chargers might be a very good fit for Jim Harbaugh if he does leave for the NFL again. But it's an attractive coaching vacancy in LA with Justin Herbert. And almost today, one of the bigger surprises of the day, the Steelers almost lose to the Dallas Cowboys 24-19. But Juju Smith-Schuster had a touchdown to escape the trap game to avoid the upset. Garrett Gilbert looked decent at quarterback today for Dallas. And Tony Pollard looked good running the football over Ezekiel Elliott. Dallas's season might be finished, but the question is going to be, which players want jobs going into 2021 at this point? And the other game of the week this week, the Dolphins beat the Cardinals 34-31. Kyler Murray was almost perfect throwing the football today. But man, Tua was actually pretty good too throwing the football. Kyler threw for 3 touchdowns, 283 passing yards, and Kyler ran for over 100 yards rushing today. Tua threw for 248 passing yards and looked great today. Salvon Ahmed ran the football pretty well. Preston Williams with a touchdown. But we saw 2 up-and-coming teams. I expect both of these teams to be in the playoffs come the end of the year. Miami at this point, I think Miami could end up being the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs at worst. But them and Buffalo could definitely be going at it. For the AFC division title in week 17. Arizona gave a fight. They're going to be good enough to make the wild card. They're at least going to be a 9-7 team. And I think Arizona is likely going to end up being the 6th seed in the NFC playoffs come this January. But I think we are starting to find where in the NFC West and the NFC this year, an 8-8 team is going to make the dance as a wild card at this point. That 7 seed is wide open. Question is who would rather tank and who would rather make a run for a 7 seed just to get bounced by the 2 seed. But we've got 7 more weeks of football. So everybody enjoy yourselves. I'll be back on Wednesday night to preview week 10. Stay awesome and see you next